Early morning, we have the early morning sun shining on the wall. Dr. Greg Ellis talking about the movement towards vegetarianism, but more importantly, the movement away from animal products, primarily because of the fat content. Now, this has been raging for 50 years, the idea that fat is bad for us. No proof, never has been any proof at all that fat is bad for us. But we're avoiding meat. People are avoiding meat. Actually, they're avoiding meat primarily not because of the meat itself, but because of what the meat contains, which is fat. And of course, we've come to believe that saturated fat and cholesterol are bad for us. Triglycerides also get put into the mix on that. Now, triglycerides are manufactured from carbohydrates in the liver. They are a fat, but generally you're not eating them. They're being manufactured by your liver, and they become a primary source of fuel. But actually what happens to them is they get stored in your fat tissue when you're eating a high carbohydrate diet. So it's not a good idea to avoid meat. In fact, I'm doing some work right now that implicates mitochondrial dysfunction. Now, what are mitochondria? They're the powerhouses in your cells that produce ATP, or the energy to power all cellular processes. And mitochondrial dysfunction is arising primarily by a number of things. But one of the major things that happens in mitochondrial dysfunction is that the mitochondria no longer process fat as a primary source of fuel. And they get forced to process glucose, which primarily gets turned into body fat. And then a compound that forms shuts down the ability of the mitochondria to process fat. So what we have now are these major taboos that came about 10,000 years ago with the beginning of agriculture, when meat supplies were becoming very limited. And the rulers wanted the meat for themselves, so they told the people to eat grains, fruits, and vegetables. And they used that by creating religious taboos. And then at the turn of the century, here in the 1900s, they implicated fat as the problem. Of course, we became more of an agricultural society, and gradually fat got blamed for all manner of disease states. And here's where we sit 50 to 100 years later. We all believe that fat's bad for us. It's a monumental mistake, believing that carbohydrates are healthy and that fat is bad. Now, fat and carbohydrates together are not good. So you don't want to do that. That's what you want to avoid. And saturated fat is fine as long as you're not consuming it along with carbohydrates. So this is the message we want to get out there. And we want to tell people that this is the case. Saturated fat is fine, despite what you've heard. And you should not be really restricting it. You should be restricting carbohydrates. So that's the message. We don't want to avoid meat and fat. Not a good idea.